Excited for this conversation today. I know I'm going to learn a lot. And my first thought is as I welcome Shea Belks, Belsky to our show. Shay, I'm wondering, what is your superpower?
People ask about superpowers and neurodiversity very often. If I had to say what my superpower is, it would definitely be related to my attention to detail and my tenacity. I don't
Mhm.
mean that in a sense of stubbornness. I am a stubborn person. Ask my wife that question, and she will say that I am a stubborn person. Um, but I do think that I am tenacious. When there's a problem to be solved, I will solve it,
Mhm.
and I'll get it done, and I'll do whatever I can. Big caveat to all of that. Neurodiversity being a superpower relies on the right environment, the right support, the right setup to really get there. It is absolutely true that neurodivergent people are capable of having superpowers with the understanding that they are in an environment that allows those superpowers, those strengths, those really awesome abilities to come forth and spring forth naturally. If someone's in an environment that they aren't set up for success in, if they're being attacked or shamed or not given the support that they need because of their neurodiversity disability, then those superpowers aren't going to come out. So to say that neurodiversity is a superpower is partially true, but I really do think that when they're in the right environment, they really shine. Neurodivergent people, I mean.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, and in case you, the listener, haven't kind of picked up on the conversation today, our guest is an autistic leader, startup leader, and a self advocate. And autism and public speaking don't often appear in the same sentence, but Shay has never been much for rules. Shay is an autistic leader, advocate, and public speaker, changing how people think about neurodiversity in their everyday lives. So we're going to unpack a lot of this and get definitely find some right terminology, understanding, and hopefully a way in which we can move forward and create a more inclusive world. So thank you for being here, Shay.
Julie, thank you so much for having me.
So I talked about you being autistic, and you also unpacked a little bit about your superpower and how that relates to neurodiversity. But for individuals that maybe are kind of unclear on what is the true definition of neurodiversity and what are the different things that fall under that category, would you unpack that for us a little bit?
Sure. Neurodiversity covers a broad variety of conditions and things such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, epilepsy. There are different ways in which the brain or the body perceives information, experiences its environment, or kind of operates differently. What's true about all different forms of neurodiversity is that they all represent neurobiological differences, differences in which the brain kind of operates to make it simple. Autism, what I am diagnosed with, being one of those things, but the ways in which my brain functions and operates vary differently from people who have ADHD and dyslexia. So while neurodiversity kind of covers all of those with an umbrella, they aren't they each completely identical to each other. I would not say that I am dyslexic or have ADHD. What I struggle with and what my strengths are vary differently from somebody who has ADHD or dyslexia. It really varies person to person and neurodivergent condition to condition.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that because I think that that's a really great point to have and to really keep in mind. Now, my understanding is that it's estimated that anywhere between 15 to 20% of the world's population is neurodivergent. Is that accurate? Is that a number that sounds right?
The number I always have is 1 in 7, which I think is pretty close to 50 to 20%. It's a lot of people, and neurodiversity is something that people are born with. It's also something that can be acquired if it's a traumatic brain injury.
Mhm.
A lot of people who have had COVID-19 have described themselves as being neurodivergent these days. So
Mhm.
generally, it is referred to as something that people are born with, but that is not exclusively or strictly the case these days, especially in light of the pandemic, where we're seeing a lot of people who have altered brain cognition and
Mhm.
altered executive functioning ability. I've seen and experienced a lot of that in my own world.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What are some of the things that you've experienced in your world?
I've definitely noticed that a lot of people who have had COVID-19 specifically, before they had COVID, they didn't notice anything differently. But maybe after COVID, they've had COVID-19, maybe their memory isn't as good. They don't remember names as much. They might have less energy. And it varies really broadly based off of what strains people had when they had it. There's a lot of the medical stuff that I don't know enough about it to get into. But it's happened often enough and to a wide enough variety of people that I say this because it's completely different groups, different everything, and it's not a coincidence. There's definitely something that's gone on in the midst of COVID-19 that is affecting people's brains and how they think, how they perceive information, which I don't think we've barely scratched the surface of in society.
I agree with you. I think that we definitely haven't seen the complete result of going through the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know that there's going to be a lot of different things that in the next few years we're going to really be able to piece together. Because again, the data is still fairly new. We've seen some trends, but not a lot of trends to be able to make some educated hypotheses there. But what one of the things that intrigued me when you and I first began speaking, and one of the reasons I wanted to invite you into the show is because you are an advocate. And again, you work for HubSpot, but
Yep,
you're the former chief technology officer at Mentra, which was and I'm going to butcher it, but I hopefully not. But it's an organization that focused on employment for neurodivergent people. Is that correct?
that's correct. It's an employment network for neurodivergent job seekers and professionals to get connected with employers and companies who value their strengths and their talents and can give them that supportive environment to help them get there.
You know, one of the things that I look back at my corporate career, and I can pinpoint a lot of individuals who I believe may fall under the category of being a neurodivergent individual, but I certainly think that we could have done better. And even now, with knowing more and understanding and creating more inclusive places, because we've had more conversations on inclusivity, we're still not creating environments in which we are bringing people who are neurodivergent and make them comfortable within our environments. And my understanding is that anywhere between 30 to 40% of individuals with who are neurodivergent are unemployed. Is that correct?
Unemployed or underemployed.
Or
Yeah.
underemployed? Okay.
Underemployment, I mean, they may have a job, but that job might not be using their skill set, their interests, what they went to school for, what they studied. They may have gone to get an associate's degree or a vocational school, but maybe they work in the grocery store, or maybe they work doing maintenance or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those jobs, but the point is that they're not making the full advantage of the skill set that they worked very hard to acquire.
So tell me a little bit of why do you think that happens? Is it because we're not creating inclusive environments, or is it because there aren't enough leaders like you who are helping advocate and bring the opportunities together with the individuals who can match the skills that the opportunities need?
I think it's more so that organizations struggle to know what to ask and know how to listen to neurodivergent people themselves to understand how those environments can be created on large scales. What I mean by that is it's easy to provide accommodations for individuals and to give people the unique support that they need to be successful. But trying to apply that at scale is where a lot of companies really struggle. Trying to scale up an accommodations process, scale up a disability ERG, scale up any sort of supportive environment where large numbers of employees who are neurodivergent or disabled more broadly need support, need camaraderie, need mentorship from their peers, or need something that is hard to accomplish at the individual bite-sized level. And I found that there's a lot of companies out there who are really interested in and invested in trying to solve these problems, but struggle when actually applying that information and putting it to practice. Not that they don't want to, but more that there's a lot of hurdles and hoops and shoots to jump through, and some companies don't have it to give or aren't interested in doing it.
Yeah, I obviously I think that there are some organizations that are really getting in pursuing to create these opportunities, but also environments. One of the things that you mentioned is mentorship, and you are a leader in the community, and I wonder who mentored you and what was your journey to become this leader within the community of neurodivergent individuals?
A huge part of my journey and the reason why I'm here is not just because of mentorship, but also sponsorship, which I think are a little bit different things. Mentorship is when someone's able to kind of stand up behind me and support me and help me figure stuff out on my own. And it's kind of like a cheerleader, that they're on the sidelines, but they aren't necessarily involved or necessarily leveraging their reputation to get stuff done. They're there to support me. And I think what really set me apart and what really helped me accelerate in my career was having really good sponsors, people who were able to leverage their political capital, leverage their connection, their network, their influence, something about them to give me a chance, to let me take risks, to give me a project to own, to let me try something new. And I think that is really what neurodivergents need more than anything, is really effective sponsors to help them take those risks, to try new things. Because if they don't have a good sponsor, they may never get that chance to try to run a project, to run a meeting, to own something, to really take responsibility and learn what that means. I think the reason why I have this experience, public speaking, running projects, daring to step into the toes of a CTO role, was because I had good sponsorship up to that point, people who had faith and belief in me to get that stuff done. And even if I didn't, at least I would come out better for it, and we would all learn how this could be done better in the future. And I really think that the evolution of mentorship for people is sponsorship, to help them really not necessarily cheerlead, but like you're the coach that's on the field helping call the shots. Or if it's a track meet, you're the track coach screaming at them to run. You're there, you're on the
Yeah.
ground.
I love that. I think that, you've unpacked that so beautifully. And certainly, I know that I've had some incredible mentors in my life, but they weren't necessarily involved in the day to day or helping me directly in my career. And it has been because of the people that sponsor me, as you described, that really I was given opportunities to take on roles that maybe I wasn't ready to take on, but I learned as I went along. And there is a level of failure. Now, do you believe that maybe the fear of individuals who are neurodivergent failing, and maybe, I don't know, is that a fear that employers have, you think?
Absolutely. That's a fear that any employer has for their employees, and it absolutely applies to neurodivergent people. The question then becomes, how do you act as an airbag or a set of training wheels or to help cushion people from the impact of that fall?
Mm.
Hence where sponsorship and good management comes in. A great sponsor or manager will try to help insulate an individual from the impact of a failure or from a fall, but still allow someone to experience that and what that means. Like, I've broken things before as a software engineer. It comes with the territory. I have been in positions where I am somewhat insulated from the effects of that, but there are other situations where I've had to face the full brunt of that. And also places in the middle where I'm a little insulated from it, but I'm still aware of what happened. And I really do think that there is a very fine line between completely insulating someone in a padded room and not letting them break anything versus letting somebody ride their bicycle, no training wheels, no support, no nothing, and maybe they fall and scrape their knee, but they learned what happened to get to that point and they don't do it again. Or if they do it again, they don't scrape their knee as badly. Maybe they land on the grass, maybe they land on their back, maybe something else happens every time they get back up and try to ride their bicycle again. But it's because of that positive sponsorship and mentorship that allows someone to keep trying and doing it again, even if it doesn't work. And that's just good advice for anybody,
Yeah.
neurodivergent or not.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I've often talked about and here on the podcast is that for me, failure has been something that I've had to redefine as someone who was a high achiever, type A personality. I was always the go-getter, and failure had a negative connotation in my book. But the more that I realized that my abilities and wins have come because failure was necessary, and failure was not negative, but it was just the right information that I needed to do it differently, to pursue it. Like you said, right? I'm not going to fall on my knees. I'm going to fall on the grass. And I think that that's one of the things I wish we would begin to change in conversations in our world, that it's not about the failure, right? And even now in schools, you are either passing or failing. And whereas we could kind of redefine that, because I think that this will have a greater impact in the journey of individuals, right, who take a failure pretty hard.
Failure is, there's a couple things. Failure is very rarely the fault of a single individual, and rarely is it the case that a failure is a true failure. In my opinion, a failure only becomes that when you don't reflect on something to learn what could have been done differently, or you aren't able to. In technology and software engineering, there's an idea called a blameless postmortem, which basically means that when something bad happened, something broke, something didn't work properly, something was impaired, that the responsibility of that does not fall on an individual, but it's often a series of processes or assumptions or individual decisions made that all domino affected into this outcome. And the outcome is, how can we stop that from happening in the future? And that applies very well to failure. The things that cause a failure to happen are rarely one person's fault. One person may share more responsibility than others, but rarely is it solely one person's job to, or solely is it one person's mishaps or failures to actually lead to that negative outcome. What really sets a failure apart from a learning opportunity is being able to reflect and say, what did you do wrong? What did we do wrong? And what can we do to stop it from happening again?
Yeah, I thank you for that. I think one of the things, and again, I think that you phrased it in a way that it's so easy to unpack for our listeners. I wonder, one of the things that I've done in my career, and especially in the education industry where I came from, we often talked about being equitable, or rather than equal. And I think that that's a conversation that also matters. Now, would you explain also, explain what is accessibility and why does it matter? Because I think that a lot of people don't understand, they feel threatened when we begin the conversation of talking about equity versus equality. And when we're talking about accessibility, they start to question, well, why is that necessary? And I think I want to really change and be part of the change in this conversation.
Accessibility is really the application and the full force of equity for people who need that sort of thing. It is broadly about creating access, creating equity, creating bridges and equal footing for people with disabilities very broadly. There's more literal and more obvious ways that this comes up in life. For instance, some form of accessibility includes curb cuts on sidewalks, braille on signage and elevators, color blindness settings, screen readers, things like that. Those are literal implementations of accessibility that is meant to create equity. If somebody's on a website and they have a vision impairment or are blind totally or partially, they need to be able to see or perceive what's on a website somehow. And that's what a screen reader does. It reads the content from a web page over audio and allows somebody to browse a page as semantically as possible to get as close to the same information as somebody who can see it the way that you and I are. Alternatively, if somebody is deaf or hard of hearing or has some sort of audio impairment, captioning, subtitles, and other things like that help people understand what content is being heard in the world, if it's a video or even in real life. People have seen sign language interpreters are very common these days. That's another awesome implication and application of accessibility. For neurodiversity specifically, the idea of accessibility is huge in the sense that we want to have an equitable access to job opportunities, and accessibility comes into play to create that access, to create the bridges, create the opportunities for neurodivergent people to get their foot in the door for those jobs, to maybe have much more specific intentional opportunities for sponsorship, positive management, and stuff like that.
One of my friends, and I look back at this experience a few years ago. Well, I mean, her son is in 21 now, but when her in early years, her son was diagnosed as autistic, and
Mhm.
she really went through a lot of blame on herself, and was really scared of the future for her son. And then she took another approach. She didn't want to be a victim and didn't want him to feel like there were any limits or limitations for him. And she created an environment in which he does investing. He can live on his own. He has a driver's license and has, really been able to get some of the accommodations to being autistic, and is living a life that, she did not imagine at one point might have been possible. What are some of the things that you're seeing that have changed from maybe 20, 30 years ago? And again, you're fairly young, so I think that this is before you came along.
20, 30 years ago, I was not around.
Yeah.
But the conversation around it was similar to your friend in a sense that when I was diagnosed with autism, the doctor said like Shea may not ever lead a meaningful life. He may rely on you for
Mm.
support forever. And that's a tough pill to swallow for parents who
Yeah.
are having a very massive bomb dropped with them kind of out of
Hmm.
nowhere. In terms of what's changed over the last 20 to 30 years, I think one hugely important thing is the talking about access, the much more equitable and accessible. Can I go back and redo that? I kind of like
Yeah,
stammered a
you
little
go
bit.
ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'll start a sentence from the top. One of the huge things that comes with accessibility for people who are neurodivergent, especially over the last 20 to 30 years, is the much greater access to diagnoses, to services, to support services, accommodations for people who are not white men. I recognize the fact that
Hmm.
I am a white man and have benefited from a lot of the existing science and literature that is published about autistic white men. But there are more and more women being diagnosed with autism at earlier ages, people of color, different gender identities, different races. And not just that the science is getting better, but the social awareness, the social stigma of
Mm.
having a diagnosis under neurodiversity terminology is also really changing. It is no longer such a damaging thing or a death
Hmm.
sentence essentially to be
Yeah.
diagnosed with autism. When I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old, the doctor said to my parents, she may never live a meaningful independent life, and I'm here now. So a lot of things have changed
I
since
love
then,
it.
and because of those things, there are more and more people being diagnosed with neurodiversity, whether it's autism, ADHD, whatever. That's not because it's growing or it's not because it's spreading around. It's because the science is getting better and more people are seeking access to diagnoses who maybe weren't before.
Yeah, I think that this is a conversation that goes back to having the right resources at the right time. I know that from an early age, the more resources that we can provide, information, education, and also opportunities without, limitations is one of the best ways in which we can empower individuals. But I think you're right. I think that the fact that we are more informed, that we are definitely seeing a change in the narrative is allowing individuals to get the support that they need, whereas before that was not possible.
The advent of social media is also huge about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, if you wanted to network other parents of kids of autism, that was not very trivially to go seek them out. Now with Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
Twitch, Twitter, you name it, Reddit, there's
Yeah.
so many more forums and places for people who maybe didn't have a community before to come together and find empathy, sympathy, strategies that work, webinars, events, resources. The web is a big place.
Hmm.
And one thing I always recommend that parents who are struggling to provide the right support to their kids or to themselves is to seek out those, I call them social groups because they are social, but still to seek support for themselves on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, Twitch, insert your social media network of choice here. Because
Mhm.
I think those are hugely effective as far as just giving people someone to talk with who maybe they may not have someone to talk about out of a clinician.
Mhm. Yeah. I live with an individual who his family has been diagnosed with Tourette's, and now as he's been getting more care and worked with medical staff, they are talking about how it's more of a tic syndrome for him. Can and I know that there's a lot of individuals, anywhere between 350,000 to 450,000 adults and children that have Tourette's. And this is a nervous system disorder, but I believe that it is possible, as with any other neurodivergent diagnosis, that it's possible for them to also live very successful and productive jobs as we're giving them opportunities and creating more inclusive environments, correct?
That is completely correct. Whether it's Tourette's, whether it's dyslexia,
Hmm.
dysgraphia, conditions like epilepsy, anything that is perhaps
Hmm.
I kind of butchered that sentence. Anything that has a more pronounced impact on
Hmm.
someone's ability to do their day-to-day lives or get something done, those folks still have opportunities to lead independent lives, to have full-time jobs, to drive a car, to do something. We have different support mechanisms in place. With maybe some of those people need more present care staff or medical care to make sure
Hmm.
that that happens, or access to that, or some sort of medical identification. Maybe their employer needs to be aware of the sorts of things to be able to provide them with the right support. Maybe somebody who has epilepsy isn't in a bright environment. Maybe they're somewhere darker or somewhere where those seizures are less easily triggered. Maybe someone with Tourette syndrome has an environment that doesn't produce those seizures either, or those sorts of episodes as well. It really comes down to the individual to know what they need and have the comfort to articulate that to the employer. And the employer, the company, or the person, whoever it is, has to be ready to not just listen, but also ask clarifying questions and dig a little bit deeper if it turns out that the neurodivergent person doesn't necessarily know what they want, what they need, I should say.
What they need, yeah, absolutely. I read a stat that about 40% of people with dyslexia also have ADHD. And I wonder, again, as we're looking at individuals going into the workplace, they have to start somewhere with a diagnosis. And what are some ways that individuals who are listening to this, if they have young children or even older kids in high school going into college, what are some of the things that they should look for to be able to get some of the support for individuals that, because again, individuals with dyslexia are only using one side of their brain to process language, while people without it are using the left side to process language. And I think that this creates a little bit of a different way in which we're showing up on an everyday basis.
I'm not 100% sure about the medical definition as far as like left to right side of the brain for
Hmm.
dyslexia. I have to get back to you on that one because I'm not 100% sure if
Okay.
that's correct. Not that I think is wrong, I just don't know. So I don't want to say that is or isn't right
Yeah, and I
more than
and I
anything.
I've did some research, and again, I went to Dr. Google for all of this. So I am not the expert. So I encourage individuals to definitely look for some of this information as well.
To answer the question more directly, though, if you are looking for diagnoses for people of any age, talking to your primary care doctor is typically the best place to start. I also recognize that getting diagnoses can sometimes be cost prohibitive. Insurance can really get in the way, and there's other sorts of factors, whether that's economic or environmental, which make it a little bit more challenging to get a diagnosis. And so I don't want to just say,
Hmm.
slap a diagnosis on it and call it a day. I do say that having a diagnosis makes it easier to access medication if that is something that would change the quality of your life. So consider that going into the process of seeking a diagnosis. And if it isn't what you're going for, or if you don't think that you need a diagnosis, you can still seek out support from your employer, from your school,
Hmm.
from your university. schools generally require some sort of medical documentation, which
Yep.
can be a diagnosis. And so, if you are a parent of someone in school and they need an IEP, they generally need a diagnosis. But the younger you are, the easier it is to achieve a diagnosis. And as you get older, that gets a little bit more difficult. So, getting an
Yeah.
IEP isn't as challenging for kids because the barriers to getting a diagnosis at that age are much lower.
Yeah, I think that you know you're correct. The older that an individual gets, it becomes harder. I just had a couple different interviews in the last month or so with individuals who are coaching women in midlife who have ADHD, and they're
Hmm.
walking through the process of what is it? Do you have it? Because by the way, and you know, for women in midlife, a lot of the symptoms for ADHD are pretty similar to that of menopause, right? And we have to kind of figure out and distinguish between the two. But I think that it's very important to be able to come into a place in which we can find the right resources. And you know, we're all going to at one point or another come across individuals that are incredibly gifted, incredibly an asset, a big asset to our organizations and to our lives in general. And we need to be able to create space for everyone to, like you said, build bridges and rather than not build them. But you support people who are autistic and neurodivergent. And I wonder for me and for individuals that are listening, what are some ways in which we can be more supportive, not necessarily in the workplace, but in our communities?
I want to take what you said one step further into that
Hmm.
question in the sense that it's not just that you're going to meet somebody who's neurodivergent. You already have. You may
Yeah,
already know people in your
yeah,
life who are
that's
neurodivergent,
true.
whether
I mean,
you
I'm
know it or
married to
not.
one.
Whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, there's people out there who don't know anything about neurodiversity who may struggle with things in their life without being able to put a name to it. I know so many people in my own life who are neurodivergent, whether they knew it from day one or knew it much further into their lives, which answered a lot of questions for them. And to answer your question of what can we do to better support those people, it is just to like be a good listener, offer support where you can to them, check your assumptions at the door more than anything. If you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. People are very different from individual to
Yeah.
individual. And just saying that two people with ADHD behave exactly the same is not correct. Same for dyslexia, same for autism, same for anything.
Hmm.
Those
Hmm.
individuals all have different strengths, different superpowers,
Yeah.
and different areas where they need more support or need some help. So don't cast wide nets for those people that you do know.
Hmm.
Be ready to have your mind changed and be willing to listen. And that applies even to people who you don't know are neurodivergent or not.
I think that that's a really good point. And again, it may not be when, but or if, but it's now. And I think that, you know, we can look around and see the individuals and how can we, you know, be able to extend the hand and be able to say, I see you. Because even in different circles, you know, we have so many differences and we tend to think that the differences are the things that divide us, but it can be a superpower that we have individuals with different gifts and different abilities. Now, you are a leader in the community. Do you think that your being autistic has helped you as a leader?
I absolutely do think so. As far
Hmm.
as being a leader goes, it has made it much more different and I would say easier for me to understand people where they are. And
Hmm.
because I've had to learn what it means for people to be emotional, understand their psyche a little bit, be able to kind of unpack individuals, it makes me more effective at understanding people, being able to process their own emotions, help them process their emotions, help them talk about things maybe they don't have the words for. And I think it helps me be a much more emotionally observant and emotionally aware leader, more so than other leaders that I know, I would say. And I really believe that that is an asset and advantage when it comes to being a people leader. I strongly believe that having emotional intelligence is extremely intertwined with being an effective leader. And I'm fortunate for the fact that I have a good emotional intelligence to facilitate that.
Hmm. Now, not everybody is really emotionally intelligent. What made the difference for you? Was there someone who helped you with really being able to build the skills of having emotional intelligence, or was it something specific?
I mean, I talked about like having a good sponsor and mentor, but like my
Yeah.
parents, 100% would not
Yeah.
be here, but my parents and my brother, they are all the
Hmm.
reason why I am here and allowing me to kind of find my own independent voice and to help me stand on my own 2 feet rather than always relying on them for support, but giving me those opportunities to try my own thing, do my own thing, and put myself out there. And
Hmm.
maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but it gave me enough confidence, enough faith in myself to try. And yeah, I would struggle, but I still think that it really led me to become the person that I am today.
Well, I love the person that you are today. You're doing some really pretty amazing things. And what I
Thank you.
love most about your story is that it's not just you climbing the corporate ladder or getting all this great opportunities, but you're turning around and you're kind of grabbing the hand of the person coming behind you and you're sending the elevator back down, like we like to talk about. Um, what are some of the ways that we can change stereotypes in this world?
Changing stereotypes is a very difficult and painful thing, and I would be remiss if I said it's easy to change them at the global level. But in
Hmm.
your life, in your world, in your personal corner of the sky, it's easy to challenge assumptions that you have about people who are neurodivergent and other people that you know.
Hmm.
Maybe reevaluate those assumptions. Maybe ask yourself, like, is this person like really behaving this way because they're just trying to grind my gears, or is there something else going on? On the
Hmm.
flip side, how can I support them? How can I help them? How can I show up for them more? What do they need to be effective? What do they need to feel like they're at peace, like they're safe? And what can I do at my workplace, at my home, in my family to accomplish all of those things? It's very easy to say I want to do something. It's very hard to actually do it. And that applies a lot to putting a hand out and say, what can I
Yeah.
do to help you?
Yeah. I think that that's something that, it's not unique to you, Shay. I think that many of us fall in that same boat. I, I love, again, that you've got an opportunity to come and chat about this and help us kind of unpack something that will help us hopefully be better advocates and allies in the workplace, but also in our everyday lives. Where do you see yourself and where can I expect to see you, more importantly, in the next 5 years? What are you working towards?
I'm really trying to focus on becoming a more confident leader at larger scales. Coming from a startup, it's a handful of people. So that's a small way to make an impact. I'm trying to become more confident to lead at scale, to help lead other leaders, to manage other managers. That's what I'm trying to do to be able to apply my knowledge and grow my knowledge and become more confident in my ability to lead much larger groups of people, to lead multiple teams, not just one or two teams at a time, and really crack that egg open to see what that style of leadership means to me. I recently became the tech lead of my team at HubSpot, which is pretty exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves over time as well. And that's kind of the path that I see myself going down over the next few years.
That's pretty cool, and I can't wait to see what amazing things you are able to go forward accomplishing and bringing. And one of the things that I know I'm incredibly confident is that, again, you're doing the work and setting, trailblazing for others. Now, if someone is listening and maybe they're looking for a sponsor or looking for a mentor, can they connect with you? Maybe someone wants to just have a chat. Is that something that would be possible?
Of course, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. If you just
Mhm.
search my name on LinkedIn, Shea Belsky, I'm there. There's only one of me. I promise you'll find me. If LinkedIn isn't your speed, I have a website, I have an email. It's hello@shaybelsky.com. My website is shaybelsky.com. If you search my name on the internet, I promise you 100% chance you will find me. There's not another person with my name out there. I promise.
Well, I love it, and we're going to put all the information in the show notes so that individuals have the opportunity to go and give you some social currency, follow you, connect with you on LinkedIn, but also share your message and hopefully create opportunities for other individuals to get to know you and benefit from your expertise. We're walking away with one lesson. I'd love to kind of come up with one thing that maybe the listeners can implement. Out of everything that we talked about, if the listener is going to, take off their ear pods and put the phone down and walk away, what is one thing that you want them to remember or you want them to put into practice out of everything that we talked about?
If you know someone with autism, you know one person with autism. And whoever you know with autism, if you know multiple people, then they all have different strengths, different needs, different superpowers, different opportunity areas. Whoever those people are, all you need to know is that they just need a little bit of different help for each of them. And it's certainly a responsibility and a duty of yours to show up for them in whatever way that they need so they can go have the superpowers be unlocked.
Amazing, amazing. I love it. Thank you so much for being here. I think that I walked away with so many really great tangibles. I can't wait to listen to this episode again. And my friend, if you're listening, please leave a review and share this episode. Go and press the button, share this episode because I am so grateful that you've listened, but I am in more desire to have you share this episode because this is the type of message and information that can benefit all of us. So thank you, Shea, again for being here. And my friends, Shea, don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you, everyone, for listening.